Okay, hello. We're here with Alex Müller, aka TheSlaSH, even though we don't hear that name too often nowadays. Basic concept behind what we're going to do, just talking to the viewers for a second, is basically we're going to go through some issues with SK over the years, good things, bad things, highs, lows, these sorts of things. But I want to say right off the bat for everyone watching this, like the concept behind doing this is some of the things we're going to address are the things that people always say, oh, SK never addresses this, or maybe people never ask it in interviews because they don't want to upset you or feel like they're trying to alienate SK, etc. And so I thought actually we'd bring out the big guns to begin with. We kind of show people right off the bat, this is, you know, we're going to go right at it with the questions that they want to hear. And so I thought we'd start out with probably the most famous thing in terms of criticism that people didn't seem to latch onto, because it all came to a head when HeatoN and Potti did this interview with Fragbite. And we'd heard over the years, they'd say sort of vague things about they were unhappy with the way the SK relationship ended, but they basically made some claims in this interview. They actually outright said, you know, SK owes us money, or they didn't pay us some money they owed us. They were actually quite vague. They never gave any specifics. No one followed up on the question and said, oh, what are you owed for this event, or is it salary, or is it something? And so basically I wanted to put it to you, like, does SK owe HeatoN and Potti money?
No. Well, I mean, I get most of the points these guys were criticizing the organization for. I had a good talk to Emil at Gamescom in 2011. We actually went out one night together. He ended up a bit drunk, I must say. But anyway, before alcohol was involved, we had a good chat about it, and he made it perfectly clear that he didn't have any beef with me or with the organization as SK Gaming is right now. He has criticism, and I think the criticism is okay to some extent. What we can say is that all the money they were entitled to in terms of their contracts, a monthly compensation and all the cash prize, it all went their way. So that's the first thing. I guess most of the criticism we got, it comes from the disappointment these guys have, because in their strong belief, and partly it's true maybe, SK Gaming is only based on their hard work into Counter-Strike. Well, I can understand it from their point of view, but SK Gaming as an organization, as a team, as a company, is and was more than 5 players or 3 key players, or however you want to name it. So it's a yes and no question. Is our success based on their success? Somehow it is, but it's just one part of a bigger puzzle, right? I mean, the year they won World Cyber Games and had this marvelous year, 2003, was also the year that Insomnia won the World Cyber Games in Warcraft 3 for us. And Warcraft 3 was a huge community on the SK website as well for the following years, with Mad Frog, He-Man, with all those guys, with John Park, Lynn, before that Zakard. So we always had stars on our roster. Probably HeatoN and Potti were the first real stars, the first real superstars, and I can't blame them for calling us out at some point. On the other side, I have to say, still they were just players, they were just a part of what happened, and most of what went down and what made this whole story a sad story, most of it, I would say, comes down to them not acting the way they should have acted in a professional way. We were all young back then, but the way this team left the organization was not in a good way. We split ways with players in many different ways, and that was one of the sad stories, so to speak. If we're looking back at the last event, the CPL Winter 2004 it was, I guess. So we had a choice. Either we sent our Swedish team, our powerhouse, or we sent the German team, which we had under contract as well, and they won a qualifier. So it's a question of, do you spend money on a team? Back then the team was not willing to sign new contracts for the new year. And we were hearing rumors that they wanted to leave. They were so unsatisfied, they saw their future in a new reborn NIP organization. We were like, okay. But then why would we pay around €7,500 on travel support to a team that only wants to showcase to their new sponsors with their new organization. Why don't we save the cost, not win a title? We're not going to win a title anyway, because these guys are so into something new that they won't focus on the game itself. That was our strong belief back then. So we had to make a call. We made the call. We said, hey, CPL rules state clearly, only one team from one organization. So SK Gaming, we take a stand here. We say the German guys go. They won the qualifier. Doesn't cost us anything. So way to go. I mean, was it a good call? Was it a bad call? It was a political call. But can you understand it from an SK standpoint? I guess you can. That wasn't the reason for them leaving. The reason for them leaving was because they thought they should be entitled to more money ending up in their pocket than ending up in an organization pocket. But then again, if you look at the history of what happened, SK was the first team to sign sponsorship deals that allowed us to sign players with a monthly fee going in their direction. And at that point, no one got a single penny out of SK. And trust me, this didn't happen like that. I didn't get a phone call from Intel saying, hey, you know, we want to give you some money. Why don't you just take it and give it to your players? That was something that we earned over the years, and we earned it in our Quake time. This is how we established the whole thing. Once we had the contract, we gave 100% of that money to the players in terms of a monthly plus travel support. Plus they got all the hardware, main boards, CPUs, GPUs, whatever we had, we gave it to the players. So I think it's kind of not only unfair, but it gets to a point where it's ridiculous to even consider SK Gaming as a company that tries to take something away from players. We were the first to push money in the direction of players, are still around, are still doing that. Flaws here and there, yes, but track record is kind of clean at our end. We do what we have to do. Of course, we established an organization around, we established a company. Now you have people working for this company, investing their time. They get money as well out of sponsorships. But then again, sponsors don't pay us for players only, they pay us for managing gaming for them.
One thing I want to go into actually, so I'll just back it up a little bit, because I actually later on would like to talk about the role of like a player in an organization in the overall combined success. But to go back to the, not necessarily specifically the HeatoN and Potti example, because I don't know in that case, but this is something I've looked into actually behind the scenes. I've talked to people who are involved in different organizations. Yep. I've looked at other organizations where people made claims like, oh, I was owed salary or money, but these organizations continue and they continue to pay other people's salary.
Yep.
And so I always looked like what could be a reason why. And one reason I heard, which actually sounded quite convincing from someone who was involved high up in an organization, he said sometimes there would be a situation where players, for example, would be given a piece of hardware, maybe an expensive piece of hardware, something that within their contract it says once you leave this team, you will be required to send the piece of hardware back. So obviously things like a monitor, shuttle PC, these sorts of obvious big pieces, not just like a free mouse pad or something. Oh, yeah. And so it's within the guy's contract that if he wants to leave, send it back. And so sometimes what would happen was when this team or player would leave an organization, someone would say to them, okay, well you have a shuttle, for example, that maybe costs $300. So we'll do you a deal. I mean, if you want, you can like buy the shuttle off us for say $200. We'll knock that off what we owe you of the salary, and then we're square for if we owe you $200, for example. Yeah. And so sometimes the player would do that, but then years later he would go, maybe he'd be a bit annoyed or something, and so that would be his reasoning. He'd go, well, you never actually paid me the $200. Or vice versa, something would happen like the player would mess up in some way that he'd done something in his contract that actually had fines, and it would be the same thing again. They'd say like, you know, we can't pay you this extra $200 we owe you because actually you messed up in this area. And so sure, if the player is kind of taking things completely out of context, yeah, he never got $200 that in some way it said, what can you say to this? Is this part of what causes these problems from the stories we hear about now?
If a player forgets about that, it does. We leave players a choice, right? Sometimes if we have a very good relationship with a player, and if there's like nothing there's no grudge, nothing to hold up against the player. Take Delpon. He's probably a perfect example right now. Delpon really wanted to join SK. He played with SK and it didn't work out in the team. And the way we split ways, it came surprising to the community, yes. But then again, it happened very, how do you say, harmonic? Can you say that?
Like amicably, like both sides agreed with the...
we agreed. And till now, Marcus, he has 2 notebooks that we send him. The old Toshiba edition and the latest Toshiba edition. And we are just asking him to send the new Toshiba edition to the next player, pass it along. The old edition, right now our standpoint is just keep it. You've been loyal to this organization, you brought a lot of good titles to this organization, you work your ass off, and the way we split ways was like, just keep it. We're not subtracting it from anything. But then you have other players where you say, okay, we look at it more economically. We don't have a personal relationship, and you played for us, we gave you money, but that's our relationship. And in those situations, we also have, okay, you have hardware, you want to keep it, or do you want to have your own hardware? Just tell me how you feel comfortable. And if a player goes like, you know, this PC, it's all worked out, everything is installed, I want to, you know, run gaming on this PC for the next 3 years, can I keep it? Of course you can. We cut you a deal. And usually the deal you get is, okay, it's a $400 PC, you keep it, we subtract 200, is that fine? Yeah, that's fine. That's what we do. That's what all teams do. That happened with other players from other organizations as well. When they got into SK, the question was, do you have a laptop? Do you have a PC? Do you need something from our side? And they told us, yeah, I can keep this if I don't want that from team XYZ that I'm leaving right now. Do you think it's a good deal? And usually we said, yeah, it's a good deal. Do it like that. Makes sense. Because you have a piece of hardware that you can rely on, you can travel with, whatever it is, it's your piece of hardware. Makes sense. So, but it only comes down to PCs and notebooks, I'd say. Not periphery, like a mouse pad, a mouse, a headset. I've never seen a team holding that against a player or having him to send it back. It's in the contracts. We could insist on it, but we don't. Because we feel like once we give out a mouse, once we give out a mouse pad, a headset, whatever it is, it's the player's piece of hardware, right? So yeah, could be that players misjudge this situation. And sometimes we have to get the hardware back. Because we don't own the hardware, our partners do. If Toshiba claims all the notebooks back, then we have to give them back, right? I mean, we have to clear our contractual situation with them, and we can only lend it to the players. But usually it goes down pretty smooth. We can keep the hardware because it's out of their books. We don't need the hardware piled up at the SK office, so the players can keep it. We get new stuff anyway, so that's usually the life cycle.
Another name which is always brought up, and I think part of the reason why these names come up is because these people left in a way where there was never a big official thing said by either side. And so as a result, there's a lot of speculation. People want to read into every little thing because it was never explained. So another famous name is obviously Tentpole, because the way he left was kind of in a weird way for everyone involved, and then there was a flurry of bringing people in the team, so the whole thing kind of just swept by. And so what do you say about the Tentpole situation?
I actually don't know. I don't know how he got out of the team. I know that back in the days we got along with him quite good. He is not a very vocal character. He is a guy that took the game very serious. I saw him destroy a keyboard at Code 5 in Moscow after losing to MTW in the semis. And when he left, it was I think it was a mixture of him taking his life to another level, him not being as dedicated to the team as he should be, and the move came from inside the team, not from the organization. That's something that people misjudge most of the time anyway. Especially in the Swedish Counter-Strike scene, it's not like we sit here in front of our whiteboard and we write down these 5 names, do a little puzzle here, do a little puzzle there, and then we say, okay, this is the new team. That's not what's happening. Actually, it's the other way around. It's the team tells us exactly what they want to do, which players, which lineup, and we try to make it happen legally, financially, so everything smoothes out. As soon as only players are involved, yeah, you could say it that way, as soon as only the players are involved and try to really make something happen, then a mess is being created. That's probably the GUG situation, that's probably the Delpan situation. If it were the teams deciding on trading a player, it would have run smooth differently. Here we had to be the cleanup crew. Here we had to be the guys taking the blame for stuff that we didn't even decide, or said, "No, we're actually not for it." But it's a team of 5 guys, and they need to feel confident. So coming back to Tentpole, I don't know exactly how it went down, but he wasn't as committed to the team. At least that's how I recall it, but I might be wrong. And therefore, he was kind of asked out of the team again. And after that, well, we found our way of dealing with him and with money owed to him, just like we did with any other player, right? At some point you get the cash prize in, and then you start paying him the cash prize. So usually these things, they work out. I've never seen any bad blood between him and I. We never met after that. But again, we weren't the ones talking to each other. In this team back then, my go-to guys were more Val and Robban. I talked to them a lot. Tentpole wasn't the guy I was talking to at an event. We didn't avoid each other. That's not what I'm saying, but you know, we didn't get to this personal relationship. Nowadays I talk to players a lot, or try to talk to players a lot, and I try to include everyone so they understand that I always have an open ear. You know, if something's bothering you, let me know. We try to deal with it. If we can solve your problem, we'll do. But I don't see any... I'd be surprised if any bad blood was spilled in the Tentpole situation, because I'm actually really not aware of that.
Okay. Another name from actually not around a similar time period was when Zet left, because when he was essentially removed, I remember there was a situation with missing a flight, but then there was also an issue where I think afterwards, I'm not sure whether he outright said it himself, but I saw some people saying, oh, he was owed money or something. And then we also had this weird situation where even with that being repeated, I mean, he would always still do interviews with us and stuff. So I always wondered, I was never sure what the bearings were on that. What was your perception of that?
Marcus and I had a relationship. Other than Tentpole, we were talking to each other. And we were talking before it happened, and we were talking after it happened. And I clearly remember him sending me an email and saying, you know, Alex, when I was made leave the team, he didn't leave on his terms. When he was made leave the team, by the team, he thought, okay, now I'm screwed. You know, they still have cash prize that they will receive in my name. They still owe me some money. Well, at least I have a PC that I can hold up against it. And he was like, but what I have to say is, back then you told me, no, don't worry, Marcus, you get all your money once it comes in, you get your money. And when all the money was paid, he came to me, wrote me that email, and said, you know, thanks for doing that. Because it's like that, he's sitting in Sweden, and I had one of these talks at CeBIT this last weekend with Müller, our former editor. And it was the exact same words. They say, you know, in esports you're used to teams, companies, whatsoever, trying to screw you over. But with SK, it was, when you told us, you'll pay every single dime of what's being owed, even if it's a process. If it's not happening right now and you can't give me the money right now because you haven't received cash prize or anything, still it was something they were trusting in, and they were just happy to say, thanks, it worked out exactly like you said, you paid it all. It's just good to know that there's people out there that stand for their word and that you can count on. So that happened with Marcus, also happened this weekend with Müller. And yeah, I'm happy to say that as far as I'm aware of that, we have a clean record when it comes down to things like that. Of course, SK as an organization is facing problems here and there, and we have to adjust payments here and there, you know, be a bit delayed. But that happens to every organization, probably to every company at some point in their life cycle. But we managed to get around those, and we managed to stay trustworthy for players. Otherwise, big names wouldn't sign with us. I mean, that's like for the community. If you hear all this bad talk about SK, fair enough. You know, I can't sit there every week and say, yeah, that's not true, this is not true, that's not true, and I won't go on forums and common because you only get flame wars, and people all of a sudden seem to be very, very into detail when it comes down to our accounting. I mean, they haven't seen a single digit from what we do and what we don't do, but still they have this strong opinion and know exactly what's going down and what's not. So I don't have the time always going out there explaining ourselves and saying this is where we are, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening there. And I don't see a need to disclosure all of what's happening inside these walls, because still we are a company and no company would open their books like that, right? But when it comes down to people like Marcus, Tentpole, Jimmy Allen is probably another example that you could pull up. Even Daniel Holthuis, Mio. Like every single player, they all received all their money. And that's all we can stand for.
So actually, yeah, to go to the thing that you went on to after the HeatoN and Potti thing about, that was another issue that HeatoN and Potti had essentially, and I think it's part of why they also felt like they were owed something, because they had this notion, and BDS has even said this when I did an interview with him, and obviously he was friends with those guys as well. He even said openly that they had the notion that because they'd had so much success in Counter-Strike, yeah, they'd been the best players, at the time the best team ever, and so they were thinking to themselves like, okay, we've got this now, but you know, we've won more now, so SK must be getting more, Intel must be giving them more, and so if they're getting more, why are we getting the same? It was this sort of a notion. And so that directly leads into what's a classic question I think every organizer has to balance out and answer and figure out himself, which is, how much does having the best players in the world, who do give you the biggest, the trophies and everything, how does that match up with the overall success of the organization? Because I mean, is it a glib statement to say that you could have the best marketing team in the world and maybe only the 5th best Counter-Strike team in the world, and you could be more successful than, you know, the 10th best marketing in the world and the absolute best of all time? How does this balance work out? Because I think a lot of people are confused about it.
Well, it's not digital, you know. It's not 0 and 1. It's, the truth is in the middle. It's somewhere in between. Having the best teams and players on your roster helps. It helps you sell a good product. But still, you have to be able to sell a product. And if you're better in selling a product than other salespeople are or marketing people are, then yeah, you will succeed. Even with a medium class team, probably. So it's in the mix. I mean, what's problematic about esports is I can't sell MC winning into the Extreme Masters. That's just one point of time. That's the past already. You know, we are looking into the next season. We are looking at MLG, where is it?
Spring Arena, maybe?
Yes. No, not Spring Arena. I think it's the spring event. Like
okay.
The online things are called Arena, whatever. We're looking at the next event right now. You know, this is where he's going. The other one, that's the past. Sponsors have already paid for the past. So I understand that players sometimes think that they make the money. Actually, the whole situation that went down end of 2004, beginning of 2005 was extremely interesting, because we got an answer from the industry to exactly this question. One of the companies we've been working with, we had a meeting with them about future contract. It was exactly falling that time. And we sat down and they opened up the discussion like that. You know, Alex, just so you know, your new team, or the team that's leaving you, so this new team, they have approached us already and said they would want to take us as in the sponsor with them. And we told them, yeah, you want that, but we're not going. Because we invest in the management. And if you as players don't believe in that management, that's your choice. But we do. So that was a very strong position we all of a sudden had. Because we knew, okay, so our job is to find the new 5 guys lineup. And let's be quite frank here. We had this in 2005. We won CPL Summer, we won CPL Winter. Now we can argue about CPL Summer not having the best teams. But at the same time our Swedish Counter-Strike team was winning CPL Summer, our Danish Counter-Strike team went to the finals of EastWC. And if you pull all of these teams that SK as an organization played in this summer together, then yeah, hell yeah, we were again a #1 team in Counter-Strike. 2003 with those guys, 2005 without those guys. I mean, Al, Fisker, Spawn, yes, they were again on this team. But a key element was William back then. So a player is a player. He can be extremely important to a team. And I'm always the guy saying, you know, I put my trust in players. I send them around the globe. I do a lot of work to make life easy for a player, to make him successful. He's the one standing out there. He is the one lifting the trophy. He's the one getting all the attention from everyone. You know, he earns it. He earns the cash prize. That's his job. We are in the background. But we rely on those guys. So it has to be a positive relationship between a player and a team. Absolutely, it has to. But if a player thinks that he is the reason why, well then look at the examples around you. There's only one player who really succeeded in making a lot of money out of his gaming career. And I would say 95% this is based on having the right management around him at the right time. Because these guys knew how to pull strings, they had the networks, they had the connections, they knew which way to go, which companies to work with, and they nailed down the deals. And they made a lot of money on his reputation, on his behalf.
It's Fatality, yeah.
It's Jonathan Wen, exactly. So, but he stands out, he's alone. A Grubby? Nope. A Moon? Nope. A Vu? Nope. All of those players you would name in one-on-one competition as standing out personnel, they didn't do that. And there's a reason behind it, because only a handful of guys are probably capable of doing it as a testimonial, as a marketing person, and then they still have to meet the right management around them that make those deals. They go out there and sell the guy, have a concept in their minds, build it, invest their time, invest their energy, and create something. So I think that if the players ever thought that they are the very fundament of what SK is based upon, then they are wrong. Then they don't get the overall picture, but it's okay. I understand why they might think that way, but it's wrong.
Since Counter-Strike 1.6 was basically the bread and butter for ESL for so many years, and the European scene of esports especially, it's easy to understand why people always hyped up the SK-fnatic rivalry. I mean, the teams were always meeting in competitions as well. In terms of just those names, SK-fnatic, do you in your mind associate them like rivalry? Is that an instant association you make? Is it real?
Oh yeah, it was fierce, you know. It's a shame that we couldn't live up to their best years with a top-notch team. I mean, in their best years, we couldn't touch them. We won here and there, but let's face it, we couldn't really touch them. And within the last 2 years, I have a feeling it has changed a little bit. Not as dramatic as it was before. I would have loved to see like two giant teams, Fnatic and SK, meet up in 4 or 5 finals in a row. And you know, have these battles being epic, close, clutch, you name it. That's the material esports is all about. Right now, it has always changed. Right now, it's the Polish team, it's Navi, and it's SK. I think these 3 teams are battling it out for the last, I don't know, probably 12 months amongst each other. I don't see the consistency in any other team right now, but Fnatic and SK, that has always been a nice fight. Since Fnatic moved into CS, and I mean, in terms of our history, that's the newer history, so to speak, right? In other games, I mean, it was epic in female Counter-Strike. When they picked up the Meteor Makers girls, I think, the final at Arbaleth, it was 2 years ago, epic. One of the best finals I've ever seen with all these overtimes. It was great seeing this rivalry even in female Counter-Strike. Other than that, we didn't have that rivalry in Quake, and we didn't have it in the RTS games. But yeah, it's nice to see how they call themselves, the black and orange clash with the blue, white and black. I don't know. I guess we're blue, white and black.
I mean, that leads directly into obviously a big thing that happened at the end of 2010. Because I know, I mean, it's one of these things where people had always talked behind the scenes like, oh, would Forrest ever leave Fnatic? And people, after so many years, people said, well, I mean, obviously he won't. He's been there for this long. He was like the guy forever there. But I know behind the scenes, you'd made offers to the guy, or you'd talk to him in, you know, a friendly way, like, hey, you know, would you ever think of coming to SK? It's obvious that you would make this because you have a Swedish CS team. This is the person you'd want to approach in those years, especially. So if he said no, or he was too loyal to Fnatic at those times, when you got this call at the end of 2010, I mean, like, what was your reaction as soon as you heard it? Was it surreal?
First, really? Second, it's happening now? I mean, he is one of the guys, Patrick is one of the guys, and even Christopher, after our little encounter with him, I'd never dreamt of him getting back on our roster. You know, I don't think the situation was so good for him. Neither was it for us, you know. But when it opened up, I talked to them and they were like, yeah, hell yeah, we want to do this. We want to build this team and we want to show that we can pull something. And to me, these guys are the reason why SK finally won the ESWC. And this title meant a lot to me, really, because it's so traditionally SK has to have this trophy. They finally did it. So it's kind of, okay, this campaign started with the opportunity of signing these guys. Circumstances were like, okay, we can do this now. So we did it, and it paid off. And of course, I'm happy it paid off like it did. Besides, they are cool guys to hang around with. They've been cool guys to hang around with when they were with Fnatic as well. But I didn't like them for being Fnatic. That's my job. But it was an intense Counter-Strike year, 2011, definitely.
How long, when they joined up with SK, how long did it take before to see Forrest walking around in like a SK hat or something? Didn't seem like every time you like a double take, you know, a little bit weird.
Kiev.
Straight away?
Straight away. We met, it was like, I think his thoughts at that point were exactly like mine. Yeah, that was supposed to be. You know, like with Karn, it's maybe the other way around. Like, that's not supposed to happen. That wasn't supposed to happen. I have a lot of respect for him as well as a player, and I would have loved to have seen him as a captain of an SK team as well. But at the same point, I get it. And I respect that he wants to stick his career to the black and orange. That's fine. I get it. But with Forrest, yeah, that was special, you know. And when I saw him, I was like, finally the right jersey.
I mean, we've touched on something that I want to move into now, which is that from these years after HeatoN and Potti, there was the 2005 with the back-to-back titles, but then there was this spell which kind of ties into the Fnatic era pretty much, where there was a Swedish team winning everything, but it wasn't SK, and SK was, they were trying to find the right mix. It would, every now and then you'd have like a little spike where there'd be a win at like a medium-sized event, or, you know, an upset win, but it seemed like they could never get the actual top spot. The number one spot was away, and so the thing I really wanted to know was, it kind of ties into two things. One is the public's perception of what should SK be with their, whatever they imagine and speculate, the money and all these things and the history, and then also your own expectations of what should this SK CS team be. Because I mean, the example I'd give is, you see, look at a team like a Real Madrid or a Chelsea. They know themselves, like, if we're going to invest this much, then if you even come second in a tournament, like, and you're the manager, you might be fired. Like, if you're the best player and you're not scoring enough goals, you might be fired. Whereas for any other team, what they produce, a very good result would still be great, you know. And likewise for the fans, if they have the perception that someone's spending a lot of money and stuff, then nothing except titles will like be satisfactory. Do you have this sense on both sides? And is it justified?
It's a bit more that that defines this equation, I'd say, especially in Counter-Strike, and it will apply to League of Legends as well. In team games, building a team takes way more time than you think, because once these 5 guys click with each other, then it's more or less a walk in the park. Then you can build up skill, then you can build up momentum in a tournament. But for this to happen, either you're very lucky and it's just right away, or you really need time to build this up. And this is what you can see in any other sport as well. You see it in football, you see it in NFL, you see it in NBA, you see it in any other professional sport. Team-based game, different ball game. And so for Counter-Strike, yeah, the lack of consistency, that broke our neck. We were good in terms of we could easily place 1 to 5. 1 and 2 was hard for us, but 3 to 5 was our range. Eventually we got some wins in tournaments as well, and we could still say, hey, you know, we are still supposed to be considered. But we never found this core. There was always one piece of the puzzle that was missing in our team of 5 guys playing the game. And I think when Christopher and Patrick joined us for the 2011-2012 campaign, that was the moment where the pieces fell into place again, and where we had a core team, and we just had one piece to move here and there. Like FaZe, Robin, Patrick, and Christopher, they were always like, yeah, that's almost untouchable. You know, one player, yeah, that he might fall off the radar. We tried with Jimmy, we played with Delpan, we played with Trace now. But those 4, that was consistency. That's something you can have in Counter-Strike. But it's better to have 5 guys stick it out. And look at the changes the Polish team made. Look at changes that Navi made. They always have a core. That's what made them so strong. Look at how the MTW lineup was built up, how much time they needed to become #1 in the world, and how they could stay in the top 3. Now they are, well, you know, now it's gone, everything's gone, but they built it up for a long time, and that's what we needed as well. After being so successful, and with all the rotation, and with key players dropping out, well, you have to define your new role. And lucky enough, we were still good enough to be top 5, but there was a vacuum that we left, and others took over. MTW, Fnatic, Navi, the Polish team. It's a phrase, but still it's true. It's easy to get up there, but it's extremely hard to stay up there. Why do you think the Polish team was so freaking out of their minds when they, you know, won this World Cyber Games again, winning into the Extreme Masters again, or at Navi last year when they repeated the Into the Extreme Masters? It's rare that a team can show this consistency for such a long time. But yeah, they will have their downtime as well. Just as others, I think Fnatic right now is in a downtime. They need to redefine themselves. With Patrick getting out of the game, that will be a huge bump in the road, I guess, for them. Unless they are lucky as always. We'll see. I
mean, this leads neatly into another thing, which is a criticism people will make, or a slant that people will put on things. Even if they talk about like success in SK, they'll always try to pit it as like SK buys its talent, it doesn't develop its talent. And this also ties into the idea of the fact that I notice people are very critical every time SK, especially the Swedish CS team, because Swedish teams are so famous for changing lineups. Every time a player is changed, they have this perception, almost as though it comes from the management, that if there's one bad result, okay, remove the weakest guy and then we'll put someone else in here. And so the reason I wanted to get your take on this is because if I actually look historically, it almost seems like to some degree the opposite to me, where if I think of like the core of Robin, Valle and Alan, these guys, you gave them every chance they could possibly want pretty much and said you need a different player to do it with, and you know there's two sides to it here. I mean, what's your take on this?
It's just in any other sport, again, it's a mixture, right? You build on veterans, and maybe if you can build a veteran, you take him from someplace else, and if he fits into your roster, it's one of the most logic things in the world to offer him a contract. That's what you do. On the other side, I think we brought up a lot of talent into esport, and the best example is Shane Hendrickson. We picked him up from nowhere. We had the right people talking to us, discussing things with us, so we laid our eyes on him at a stage where nobody else was actually knowing that he was out there. And we thought, yeah, maybe in 1.5 years this guy could be a top 3 player. Well, it took him 6 months to become the dominant force in this 1-on-1 title. And he had quite a campaign for the next 2.5 years. So let's be honest, we pulled him from nowhere and he became a star. He played his career, everything, one organization, SK Gaming. Look at Jimmy Allen. We took Jimmy from nowhere. He was a player that people knew from playing online on Swedish servers, but he wasn't known in the European scene. We placed him in this team, and he played his first offline event. That was the Swedish Intel Extreme Masters qualification tournament that happened at Gamescom. It was Fnatic, NIP and SK. And that was exactly the time frame when we were the number 3 in Sweden. NIP and Fnatic were battling it out. They were the number 1 and 2 in the world. We weren't. We won this tournament. We brought in this young gun. We believed in him. We picked up talent. He wasn't a finished player. We made him the player he became. We were probably the first ones to pick up Get Right. As in the big teams.
Yeah.
He had his best years in Fnatic because we did a mistake there. But still, I think SK Gaming is not only about taking in veterans, which is a natural thing to do, but also into developing new talent and bringing them into a veteran level, into if he is a Hall of Famer whatsoever level. So we do this and we do that. But that's a mixture you need to have within a team.
With that, I mean, to set this question up, you made a great case about Get Right there, like the fact that you obviously like missed a step there, or maybe it wasn't the right time, but you got him back later and it's been great for SK. I wanted to get your take on, is there one player, if you think back now, or that automatically was already in your mind, that he's the guy who got away? So either he's the guy where you tried to sign him and things never lined up, so it never happened, or you had a shot, you had this guy lined up when he was maybe not so well known, and then you thought at the time, like, I'm not sure, and then later on, without anyone knowing, this guy became crazy. Was there someone where he would have been a great fit or a great piece, but then it never worked out? Is there anyone in any game you can think of like that?
Todd was with SK before he was in 4K. And yeah, he would have been a hell of a player in our lineup in his prime. Absolutely. Are there other names? I don't know. There's just very few players that we didn't get or got too late. Like Dennis Wallenberg. We signed him 2 years in a row, and 2 years in a row he backed out, and then he finally really signed with us. So it was an internal joke when Andreas told me, hey, Wallenberg has signed his contract. I was like, yeah, right. We're going to see about that in a couple of weeks. But yeah, he finally signed with us, but that was probably after his prime. So, do you always find the right timing to have a player on your roster? Obviously you don't. And we have a couple of good examples where we did. Todd is one of them. Christopher Allison is one of them. Dennis Wallenberg is probably one of them. That I don't want to discredit players for what they achieved within SK when they were under contract with us, but they achieved more with other teams. That's all I'm saying here. And that's also our fault, right? Because we didn't manage to sign them. That's our job.
Another topic, and this kind of hits on a lot of things we've discussed here, ties into them all. It's the idea that, and I'll set the criticism up again, because I like this system where we kind of present the criticism and then allow for the response. So people at the same time as one group, for example, the CS fans will say, oh, they spend all this money and they just bring in someone new every time something goes wrong. And yet in some other games, people are complaining that SK isn't spending enough money. I want to see more money spent on StarCraft, Dota, LoL. They want you to spend more, but then at the same time other people are saying you're spending too much. And so here's the question I have, which is, like, how do you balance paying for the talent that you want or paying too much? Because I'll give you an example just briefly, which is that a game like the NBA, where they actually have a cap to their salary and people only have so much money to spend, you see times when some team has already decided before they came to the negotiation table, we have to have this player. I mean, a great example would be Carmelo Anthony, for anyone who follows basketball now. The New York Knicks basically gave up like everything that they had to give up to get him. And now when you look at their team's still quite far away, even though they've got the star player, from being what they thought they could be. And so you could make the case that the really smart GM, even if that's the guy he wants, he'd have to go, it's too much though. It's the guy I want, but it's just too much to make it worthwhile for me. So how do you balance that yourself, seeing these two weird, contrasting things that don't, you know? I mean, are there times when you have to do this?
It's a very dynamic market, that's the problem, right? And game titles change. I don't know. There is cases that you can hold up against us where we overspend, or we really burned money. But I know this now. Would that have affected the calls I made back then, or we made back then? Probably. But maybe we would have only changed our mind in 20 or 25% of the cases. It's hard. You know, you have to look at a lot of variables in your equation when it comes down to exactly these numbers. Viewerships, people on your website, what are they interested in? How does the player contribute to your community, to your website? Does he sell product? How is he marketing wise? Do your sponsors react? Do they want to have him around at an event, or do they say, please send us any player but this one, we don't need this one, like he's a douchebag? This happens, you know. Players sometimes don't know how to market themselves, and I understand that they are not professionals like in sports who get millions every year and who can get a coaching and everything. They are thrown into the cold water here, but still it's a lot of arguments that you have to count in on, and then you kind of level the price tag you can put behind a player. Is he important? Is it a team game? Is he important for the overall team? Is he probably a captain? Does he hold together? Does he tie together the team? Yeah. Is he just, is he an additional player that you need? Is he something to back up the star player? Look at it. I mean, in StarCraft 2, we have one player. 2012 kind of pays off, you know, Home Story Cup. Now here, GSL quite successful, MLG, we'll see. But the thing is, if he doesn't win, people will show up from everywhere and explain to us how professional gaming has to be executed, and that you need like 5 guys of this caliber. Well, you can't pay 5 guys like that. Or we can't. Other teams might be able with some poker money backup whatsoever, or a weird investment. We can't. So we have to make our calls, and we make these with all the assumptions that we can bring to the table. And that's what I said, plus the budget. And then we try to make the best out of it. And whoever is out there and thinks that we try to make stupid calls, that guy could or should question himself, I guess. Because of course we are trying to make the best calls here, but still we're dealing with esport. We are dealing with a competitive game where if 16 players enter a tournament, 15 will lose. At every tournament, only one will succeed, will hold up the trophy. And you being the one always with this player on your roster, very unlikely to happen. and would be boring for esports as well.
The last questions I've got head, as we close things up, head in a more light-hearted, hypothetical way, and so they're not like life and death, obviously. And so the first one I want to put to you is, let's imagine in the future, after SK has become the billion-dollar company, you know, you've retired, you've gone to a life of philanthropy with all the SK millions. You decide one day that to make like a monument to SK forever, you're going to have a laser satellite burn sort of a Mount Rushmore type scenario into the hillside of Cologne. And so you're going to pick out the 4 players, the 4 faces that would represent SK for all time. You know, the Mount Rushmore of SK. Which 4 names come to your mind? Who should be there?
Griff, Kane, Musa, and number 4 would be the unknown guy, who stands for all the other players. Well, that's the foundation, you know. These guys had the idea. Let's be honest here. These guys had the idea, they had the passion, they created Schroed Commando. They had the guts to do it. But we would need probably the whole Rocky Mountains to put everyone up there who is entitled to be up there. Because there's so many names. The FIFA twins, the female Counter-Strike team, Zakart, Lynn, the RTS guys, Insomnia, Madfrog, He-Man, now MC, Shane Hendrickson. Most of all the Counter-Strike guys ever played for SK Gaming. It's just, I mean, if you look at it overall, all the titles we won in different games, even Husky, it's a racer, even he belongs there. If you look at all these guys, then yeah, it's probably the Rocky Mountains.
If I know you're a big fan of football, a fan of Bayern Munich, etc. If you could pick a Bayern,
etc.
Okay, Bayern Munich. If you could pick one player in the history of Bayern Munich, either the way he plays or his approach to the game of football, to give people an idea of who Alex Müller is, like this is the guy who. He's my double on the pitch. Who would you pick as the guy who represents the way you do things in your life?
Bastian Schweinsteiger.
Why?
Because, well, if you follow Bayern Munich just a little bit, you can see that he is the engine that ties everything together. He's not the captain, and he's not the number 10. He's a double 6. But whenever he feels like we need to gain speed in the way we play, he does exactly that. When he feels like we need to slow down, he does exactly that. And he has a way of playing the game which, from my point of view, is extremely fair. I saw him getting fouled by his opponent, and it hurt. And the ref directly came to him, and he saw the ref was pulling the yellow card, getting his opponent booked. And he directly stood up, went to the ref and told him, you know, it hurt, but seriously, from this situation, I can tell you, this guy didn't want to foul me. This is just what happens in football. He tried to prevent his opponent from being booked. And that's something you don't see in professional football. That was something that really impressed me, because that's his game. And he doesn't want to, you know, he doesn't want to have his opponent being light on him in the next duel they have just because he's booked. He wants to play the game on the top level, and therefore, you know, he goes beyond playing fair, I'd say. So I love it about him, and I would love to think that we in SK try to be like this situation, plus winning.
Okay. The last question I have, I also know you're a fan of music. You like kind of the songs that get you up, and so I want to know if you were in some kind of, I mean, the great example would be like in Korean esports. They have a bit of like the WWE style element to it, where you come out to your intro music that you picked yourself, and it's kind of like the music that you want to hype everyone up when you're coming, like your personality, etc. Which track would come out if you were a player of some kind in this sense?
Paradise City, Guns N' Roses.
Any reason why?
It's the best song in the world.
Okay,
that's the way it's built up, you know. We would have to make a cut version of it, because it builds up with this with the guitar in the beginning and the chorus, but then Axel hits the, what is it, a pipe, or how you call it?
A whistle?
A whistle. Hits the pipe, yeah. Right. Good one. No, he hits the whistle, and then, you know, the whole song falls into this da 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 da. That will be the moment where the team will get on stage, or the player will get on stage.
Okay. What's the final message you want to give to people who watch this then, and then you want to thank, say hello to?
Well, I think it's always good to, especially in esports, to try and look behind the curtain, try and understand what's really happening. I know there's a lot of flaming, a lot of hate going on in esports. I've always been the kind of guy who thought it's ridiculous. To some extent, I think we need this because it spices things up. But then again, before you get too personal out there, try to understand what's really going on. And if you got questions, ask them. Most of the guys in esports are quite open and quite vocal about what's happening. And especially to editors out there, before you write a story, do the double check. Talk to this side, talk to that side, and try to be balanced. Don't try to be religious in this direction or that direction. You don't have to be an SK fan. You should, but you don't have to be. Right? Yeah, that's that. I hope I could give something to the community in terms of content here, so they understand us a little better, understand decisions a little better, understand what the going-ons at the office a little better. And yeah, everybody's welcome to ask us, try to be a part of it. That's basically it. In terms of thanking sponsors, you know, if I had to thank sponsors and I had to start back in 2000 with the first contracts, people would get bored, I guess. So the most important people I've been working with in my career so far, they come from companies like Intel, SteelSeries, but also Kingston, and we're dealing for a long time with these guys now. And now the new additions, of course, are Toshiba, and there's young guns entering the market that I'm keen of working with in the future even more, Gunnar Glasses being one of them. New product, very interesting approach. Let's conquer esports, let's do something here. And you know, the people out there, it's been said in interviews before, but this whole industry, it lives from partnerships, from sponsorships. So the perception that we can build up in a professional company like a SteelSeries, or like an Intel, or like a Kingston, like a Toshiba, this perception is the thing that brings money to the very system that we love so much, that the entertainment that we see, you know. The moment where MC claims this trophy this weekend and just grabs it from its stand, not waiting for anyone to hand it over to him, just saying this is mine, this is the very moment all of us want to see, whether it's MC or another player. That's a different story, but that's the story we want to see, and this will only happen if these companies support us. And this will only happen if we give them the right perception. That's something people have to understand.
Danke.
Gerne.